Hey there, and welcome back to another devlog for our project Night Run. I'm Matto, and in this video, I want to talk about the idea of Creative Commons Zero IP, the way that's manifesting in the NFT space, and the way that we're using it in Night Run. Let's get started. So the Creative Commons Zero idea, or CC0 idea, has been around for a while. It's not something that's unique to the NFT space, but it's something that's become a little bit of a movement there in the past year. And what the idea is that we're creating projects, creating artwork, and creating kind of intellectual property around that artwork, characters, world building, lore, and open sourcing those things for anybody to take and to use and to build with, right? So it's this kind of frictionless environment for people to take these cultural objects and make new derivative works, incorporate them into works. It leads to this kind of sampling, combinatorial aesthetic, which has been pretty interesting and is something that we've decided to kind of play with in Night Run. So Night Run, for those who aren't familiar, is this motorcycle game where you're driving through a procedurally generated nighttime city and seeing artworks appearing either on billboards or as kind of 3D sculptures in the landscape, right? And a lot of the artworks that we're using are from this CC0 category, right? So one example is one of my favorites, which is called Cryptodes. There's another project called Nouns. There's one called Blit Maps, right? And so all three of these projects have released their artwork into the Creative Commons and say, take it and use it the way that you like. Let's start with Cryptodes, one of my favorite examples. It's the thing that I use for my profile picture on Twitter. It's created by an artist called Gremplin, came out just over a year ago during the summer. And they're these kind of cute pixelated toad characters. There's 10,000 of them. They're procedurally generated, combining different eyes and bodies and faces and stuff. And they've got this kind of fun, mischievous energy around them. And they're actually one of the first projects that was released as Creative Commons Zero, saying, take this IP, take this idea, take these characters, and do whatever you want with, right? And so they were kind of part of this early wave of projects that chose to do this. And there have been many others who have come behind them and followed. Taking the example of Cryptodes, right, it creates a situation where, as someone who is interested in integrating other artworks into our artwork, we don't want to get into a situation where we do that and we do the work of doing it, because in many cases it can be a significant amount of effort to implement these things in the game. We don't want to get in a situation where we do that and then we lose the rights to have them there and have to undo that work, right? So any kind of legal uncertainty or licensing uncertainty would really kind of put a damper on that. And I can give an example of a project that has a kind of a complex license that we chose not to include for that reason, right? But with Cryptodes, because they're Creative Commons Zero, we know for sure that they're in the Creative Commons. We can include them in the project. In our case, the game is free, right? So we're not really trying to commercialize it exactly, but if we wanted to, we could, right? And so it just puts us in a situation with a lot of certainty. And this is a kind of practice that has a certain resonance with the Ethereum culture of this kind of idea of permissionlessness or trustlessness, where we're deploying software to a public computing environment, to a public blockchain, and then anyone can interact with it, can call its functions, can do things with the protocol, and not get, for example, blacklisted or blocked or banned, right? So it's this idea of decentralization and creating kind of public infrastructure. So CC0 functions as almost like a kind of a cultural public infrastructure, right? Where we have these characters and these art assets, and they're in the cultural commons, and then they can be played with, combined with other things, used, mutated, remixed, and so on by anyone who's interested to play with them. So that's kind of perfect for a project like Night Run, where we want to include a bunch of different collections and then allow people to make choices about what collections are shown as players drive through the city. So I think that the CC0 trend is one that we're going to see continue. It's obviously not appropriate for all projects. Some projects also take a more limited license or a more collector-focused license. Terraform's a project that we've worked with in the past is an example of that, right, where it's a much more collector-focused license. So the person who collects the artwork has some special rights and privileges, but those do not extend to just anyone who wants to do whatever with it, right? So when we did our Hypercastle Explorers project, we actually reached out to the Math Castle studio and got a license to include the terraforms that we used in the artwork that we created for that, right? So there's a whole range of approaches in the space possible, different ways to do this, but I think this is one of the interesting aspects of the NFT space is that we're seeing this kind of experimentation with the idea of licenses, rights, and so on, and a bunch of different models and ideas being tried. As a kind of a counter example to this, an example where a license created friction and led to us not including it in Night Run is the CloneX project by the Artifact Studio, which is now owned by Nike. They have a license which grants some permissions to the people who collect the pieces, but has a lot of fairly complex requirements, including the fact that you need to modify the artwork to remove the logos and branding. And looking at that, even if we felt like we were able to take that effort and make it happen, it just kind of creates a situation where like, man, I'm really worried that I'm going to do all this work and then I'm going to receive a letter from Nike in this case saying, hey, you're in violation of our license. You need to undo the work that you did and take these assets out of the game, or maybe some other, or even worse, right? Like some kind of other bad situation, right? So, and so that's an example of a situation where having this more complex and more cumbersome license means that we're much less likely to use it and much less likely to incorporate this artwork into our game. So that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, drop a like for the YouTube algorithm. Drop me a comment if you have any experience working with Creative Commons Zero assets yourself. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.